Salutations, it's me, Salty. Welcome back to 2 Cents to Listen. Today, we're finally going over the MOTU Origins He-Man. I'm just kidding, I talked about him months ago. No, I'm going to be using these items to turn him into Anti-Eternia He-Man, whom first appeared in I think it was in Germany or something in 1985 in some storybook or whatever, and has become somewhat of a fan favorite. I happen to like Anti-Eternia He-Man a lot. I have the classics version of him somewhere in one of these boxes. But, since it's only He-Man and Skeletor and the pegs around here, I figured, why not? It should be pretty easy. I'm using RIT dye. It's the powder version. This is my first time ever using this stuff, so it's going to be a lot of trial and error. Luckily enough, if I mess it up beyond repair, then I can just go to Walmart and get another one. There's like 20 He-Man over there. I have watched a couple videos on how to use RIT dye. It seems to vary from plastic to plastic, or material to material, like plastic versus fabric versus nylon versus all sorts of stuff. So it's gonna, I don't know. I kind of took the parts that I like from what I've seen, and I'm just gonna do it the way that I can figure out how to do it. There's gonna be some footage of the kitchen. I'm gonna do some voiceover on that just because I don't want to move everything into the kitchen. So footage will probably be filmed on my phone with voiceover done in post, so, I'll see you in there. So, you can see here that I broke apart He-Man into pieces, and I'm using a metal pot, just because that's kind of what was recommended to me. I typically would have just brought it to a boil and dropped these pieces in there, but because it's a metal pan like that and it was going to be on a heat source, I decided to use that trash can instead, which I've also seen a few other people do. So that's kind of what we're doing right now. I'm waiting for that water to come to a boil. So here's me checking the temperature, because I've also seen something like you only want the water to go to like 60 degrees, 140 degrees, and then some say to bring it straight to a boil. So I just kind of guesstimated on it. Adding the powder now, and I'm going to start mixing it up here just so it doesn't kind of, solidify on the bottom. I want to make sure it's all mixed up and good to go. And here I elected to add the dye and water first into the trash can, and then I decided to add the figure pieces after that, and it's kind of difficult because a lot of the pieces weren't afloat. I tried to dye the weapons, the armor, the shield, all that stuff, but the torso in particular, aside from the weapons of course, really likes to float. So it is difficult to get that to kind of sink to the bottom. In the future, I would try using, I don't know, like a colander or something wire mesh to hold it down. And you can see it didn't do anything at all. Just made my stuff really wet. It changed the color on the armor a little bit, but not a whole bunch. It did, however, greatly affect the color of my trash can. So you can see 3 different times trying to do it. So then I decided, well, maybe it's not sticking because it's a smooth surface. Even though I washed the action figure, let me try sanding it and see what happens. And pretty much nothing. It didn't do much at all. As you can see, it took a little bit but not a lot, so I decided to change methods to use this Ritmore synthetic liquid dye, which was way better. Just way better, as you can see. It does take 2 baths though, just because you can see the joints don't really get dyed very well. But the sanding kind of messed with it. You can see where it took to the axe a little bit. For some reason it turned the sword gold. I'm not sure why. And it took to the shield somewhat. But there you can see He-Man's torso pretty much just turned bronze. There it is up close. That and the loincloth turned bronze pretty badly. But you can see there how the sanding really kind of janked it up a little bit. It didn't turn out very good. So in an effort to kind of fix most of that, I gave him a little bath in some spray paint, mostly just the torso and the thigh part, or the loincloth mostly, but it helped a lot, especially giving him a second bath with the synthetic dye and a little bit of spray paint. So here's what we got so far. Just kind of put everything together. I did, hit some stuff with some spray paint just because, you saw the photos. But I'm going to take them back apart, pull the hands and all that off and go over with some paint pens and turn the stuff that needs to be red, and, kind of put the white back in the mouth and the eyes a little bit. it's still there, but it's been kind of washed over a little bit just because of how many times he's been in the dye. So we'll come back and, you know, we'll just do some painting real quick. So with our close-up, you can see what's kind of left of his teeth. His eyebrows are still present and all that, but I'm going to go ahead and hit the teeth with the white first, and then we'll hit the eyes. So, looks a little bit better. Go ahead and hit the eyes next. It's a little harder to hit the eyes because they're so small. Alright, they're a little sloppy, but I can go through and clean those up. Just the way He-Man's eyes are, they're not exactly open, they're pretty squinted. So, doing the best I can with pretty much working on a solid black surface and having to look through my webcam. So, next I'm going to paint the bracers, which is pretty straightforward. I'll be using red. Went ahead and did the shield off camera, doing the same thing, just red paint and a paintbrush. So you can see some of the areas that are kind of splotchy, so I have to go with a detail brush and kind of straighten up those lines a little bit. At a distance it's not so bad, but up close you can definitely tell. Also the spray paint kind of gave it a neat texture, so that's kind of cool. I also did the other arm. You can see a little splotchy there, which again, just gonna have to go through with some black paint and kind of clean that up, but didn't see the point in showing you both arms, so there you go. Next, I'm going to take care of the trunks, and thankfully it's the belt that gets painted red with Anti-Eternia He-Man, so let's go ahead and do that. There we go. It's probably going to take another coat because the black is shining through pretty easily, but not a bad start. What I'm going to do now is add the red to those eyes and hope for the best. So up close you can tell that an amateur did it, but at a distance it's not that bad. His eyes pretty much disappear once the dye takes hold, so kind of difficult to figure out where they're at. Now that I have them up here, I'm just going to go ahead and hit these with red. The dye didn't exactly take hold on them, but I don't see that being much of an issue. Just like that. That's really all I'm going to do to them. And if I get any on the hair, that's fine, because the hair is going to be red anyway. There's that. Now it's time to hit the little cross thing on his chest, which I think might prove to be a little more difficult, maybe, just because it is raised and has some kind of grooves on it. So, we'll hope for the best, though. It'll take another coat, probably, but it's not so bad. I might just leave it like that, though. Just waiting on the black paint to dry on the face there, trying to clean up the eyes as best I could. So, went over the iron cross again and put the second coat there on the belt. Once the face is dry, I'm going to hit the hair, and then we'll put them back together, and that should be it. Okay, so how I'm going to do this hair, basically just going to keep hitting it with the paint pen here, and then I'm going to use a brush to kind of smear it in. Just like this. I'm using this kind of wide wedge brush to cover a lot of surface area, and then I'll use a smaller brush to kind of get in along the face and the forehead without getting it on the skin. So I feel like that's kind of my best course of action to do this. Also, I should mention while I'm doing this that I don't know whether it was the spray paint or the dye, but reattaching the head proved to be very difficult. So I had to kind of sand down the peg a little bit, or the dumbbell, to kind of get the head to pop back on. That's the only reason why this head is not popped off, because I'm not 100% convinced that I'll be able to get it back on. This was definitely an experiment of sorts, so a lot of kind of learning as I went, because I've never dyed an action figure before. I feel like there's an easier way to do an Anti-Eternia He-Man, but I do not have that. I'll go over it here in a minute once I'm able to focus on that instead of what I'm doing. Alright, so there's the hair. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush and get in there along the sides of the face as best I can. I reckon that's about as good as it's going to get, and I kind of like that there's some black seeping through instead of it being solid red. So, kind of makes it the brownish color that it's supposed to be instead of fire truck red. I'm pretty happy with that. Well, I'm going to put them back together, and we'll just kind of give them a once-over and call it a day. Just kidding. There's a couple things I want to do with these weapons here, just to change them up a little bit. And I decided I'm going to turn the edges of this thing red too, so there's that. So he's all done and put together, and here he is next to the $1 He-Man that I made back on the 23rd of December 2020, and just regular He-Man from MOTU Origins, and you can see the stark difference. I'd say that the dye took very well after a certain point. Just to recap, the box dye does not work at all. You got to get the synthetic bottled liquid dye. You saw that in the photos. You should be fine with just liquid dye. I gave him a couple baths just to try and get that torso to turn black, and it just kept turning bronze. Whether it was caused by the sword only, or if it just does not take the dye at all, I'm not sure. So have a can of spray paint on standby, at least for the torso. I gave the knees and the boots and all that, I gave them multiple baths just because, like you saw in the photos, if they dye a certain way with the hinge facing, and then you rotate the hinge, that part doesn't get dyed, so they have to take a couple baths just to get all those, little articulation bits dyed. I just let them sit in the dye for a few days. I think the longest I let it sit was 4 days, and that was with the powder dye, and it did not take. So don't waste your money on the powder dye. Just get the synthetic liquid dye, and that will solve most of your problems. And, spray paint for the weapons and all that, if you want to dye the weapons, which you don't have to. I just chose to. If you wanted to make it easier on yourself, you could just use most of Ninjor to make an Anti-Eternia He-Man. Just pop off these boots at the bottom and use Tri-Klops, which are solid black anyway. You would still have to dye the arms, so I guess you could just cut these fins off and paint all this black if you wanted to, and then you'd only have to worry about the head and the hands, really. That'd be the easiest way if you want to cobble one together, but I don't know if anyone wants to spend the money on a extra Ninjor and an extra Tri-Klops just to do that when He-Man is, clogging pegs everywhere, so that is an alternative. And that's really all I got for today. It was a very steep learning curve. It's the first time I ever tried to dye an action figure. I'm very happy with the results. I do like the way it turned out. I just kind of wish I knew then what I know now, kind of deal. So I might try to redo him later and see how that goes. Just doing the one box of dye. I don't know. There's a plethora of He-Man sitting on the shelves, at least in all the places that I've been to. So $14 for an extra He-Man, and I think it was $5, maybe $4.50 for a bottle of dye off of Amazon, and you can find that dye at Walmart, except the Walmart near me only had the box dye for black. If you do get a bottle, make sure it says synthetic on the front of it. The all-purpose dye does not work. The powder dye does not work. So save yourself some time and agony and just get the synthetic to begin with. Also, make sure that you use a receptacle, like the trash can or whatever, that you don't mind getting trashed, because my once white trash can is now different shades of yellow on the inside and is stained black, so something to be cognizant about. So I'm a big fan of the aesthetics of this character. I hadn't heard of him until I got into MOTU Classics, and that's one of my favorite Classics figures just because I like the color scheme and the look of him. You let me know what you think down below. Is this something that you're willing to try? Is it something that you'd considered, but now you kind of have, I guess, instructions, for lack of a better word, to do it? If you choose to do it, just make sure you watch the whole video. If you start doing it step by step as I'm doing it, you're going to make some mistakes like I did. So, anyway, if you like what you saw today, then all that asks is that you click like on the video and subscribe to the channel. That's a great way to help me out, and I very much appreciate it when you do. And I do thank you all for stopping by today and spending some time with me. Until next time, I'm Salty, signing off.